Greetings. I'm Ann Voorhees Baker, founder and producer of Women at Woodstock Writers Retreats, live and in person and online. Welcome to the Women at Woodstock Writers Colony 2024 Short Story Collection, read by the authors of the Writers Colony. Initiation by Carol Ann Marash.
In my part of Brooklyn, 3 blocks from the East River, flowing along the skyline of New York City, the summer sun pressed hard against the skyscrapers, sending blades of gold across the water and onto North 6th Street. They poked into the windows and doors along my street, looking for a place to stay. I read by this light on my front stoop every summer. Summer dusk found me once again sitting on the stoop with Grandpa Anthony, quietly engaged in our ritual of reading and thinking. I read, he thought. Grandpa sat on his folding chair like Buddha, quiet and serene, though the twinkle in his clear blue eyes and his pure white hair reminded me more of Santa Claus. My Italian grandfather was stocky, with powerful arms and legs planted firmly on the earth like ancient trees. His one eye was wide open, while the other eye squinted against the smoke from his crooked Italian cigar. His round, mostly bald head moved side to side, gazing up and down our street, like a sentinel guarding both our block and me. He was as solid and purposeful as a bocce ball, a game he loved to play in McCarran Park. I felt safe whenever he stood watch. Only the turning of my library pages could be heard tonight, muffled occasionally by a car passing, a horn honking, or a stick hitting a ball. I was aware of the new stack of books I had just brought back from the Williamsburg Public Library. Their spines were pressing against my hip, urging me to read faster. They were waiting for me to finish the mystery in my hands. But instead of opening one of them, I stared into space. It was the summer before 8th grade, and a change was coming. I could feel it like seltzer bubbles along my nerve endings. I still adored reading, but somehow it wasn't enough anymore. There was this wanting to do more and be more beyond a book in my front stoop. Leaning my chin on my hand, I sighed, looking at the book that I just finished. I wanted to start writing my own story and do things I read about in books. Just then I heard the hiss of Grandpa Anthony's match as he relighted his cigar for his evening smoke. I turned to look up at him, smiling, when he asked, "You like it a book?" in his endearing Italian accent in English. He could neither read or write in English, but smart he most certainly was, especially in the ways of the world and taking care of family. "Yes," I chirped. "It kept me guessing till the end. I think I'll start this next one about a girl." I had looked up at him then and stopped talking when my eyes locked on a group of girls silhouetted by the setting sun, walking down North 6th Street toward me and my house. Who were they? Would I know any of them? Where were they going? Why were they coming down my block? Would they say hello to me when they passed? My mind flew through the possibilities as I put the book behind me and sprang from the stoop like a soldier at attention. But attention to what, I did not know. Stumping down the block like the march of the wooden soldiers, they jostled and swayed against each other. Before I knew it, they clustered in front of my stoop, all smiles and giggles. My hand in greeting did not reach higher than my waist. I felt silly at my lack of confidence. Then I realized I knew them all. A few were even my classmates. Others I recognized because they were friends of my friends. They all lived on or near North 10th Street and attended a different parochial school or the public school PS 17. Never had I seen them all together, and certainly not all together on my street. They were known in the neighborhood as the North 10th Street girls, and I had no idea why they stood in front of me now. The girls looked at me, at my pile of books, and then at my grandfather. That bear of a man, bless him, knew when to make an exit. Grandpa Anthony rose, nodded, and winked at us, smacked his lips around his cigar, snapped his folding chair closed, and ambled into the house. Watching him go, I had time to calm down and with any luck not make a fool of myself. These were the North 10th Street girls, still standing in front of me. Gang is a word loosely applied here. They looked like a gang, but a cool gang of girls. Short, tall, blonde, brunette, Catholic school, public school, Italian and Polish. The only thing we had in common was our neighborhood. We weren't like the Jets and the Sharks, but we were young girls, almost women, and I knew, just like me, they were ready for the world to notice. Are they here for me? My brain screamed. Yes, yes. I could barely keep myself from clapping and jumping up and down like a little kid. Instead, I kept my mouth shut, terrified that I could be wrong. As Arlene cleared her throat and stepped forward, I knew they had come for me. I was in awe of these 8 girls who had walked from North 10th Street to see me. Arlene, Donna, and Adeline were my classmates at St. Vincent de Paul Catholic School and stood in front of the group. Irene, Patty, and a model beautiful girl they called Wiggles, I have no idea why, her name was Donna, fanned out behind them because these 3 girls were tall. Even though they went to a different parochial school, I had seen them around. Maria and Joan I did not know because they attended public school, and I knew no one from public school. Maria, her head held high, was 5 foot tall, while Joan stood 4'10". The sisters bracketed the group like bookends. At that moment, I would never have guessed that Joan, dubbed the mighty midget at 4'10", would ultimately become my best friend. All of this I would learn later. My mouth took a vacation then. I realized I wasn't breathing because I was too busy absorbing the details of their clothing, hair, and makeup. Midriffs and frayed tight jeans and chambray or white denim seemed to glow, while my cutoffs and rumpled t-shirt made me look like a tomboy. They displayed their coolness without even trying. My eyes inspected their sparkly pastel eyeshadow and frosty lip gloss. I wondered what I would look like in makeup like that. Well, in any makeup. Looking like they did, I was sure some must have boyfriends, maybe one of the North 10th Street boys, who they probably kissed in the darkness of the factory doors, near McCarran Park. Yep, I just knew it. I may have been inexperienced, but reading all those books taught me a few things, but I never had done any of them. Now my single, thick, waist-length braid suddenly felt like an anchor to my childhood. As casually as I could manage, with my heart causing my shirt to quiver, I asked, "So where are you girls heading tonight?" They may have sparkled, and they may have had more experience than I, but they weren't mean, and so did not prolong my anxiety or misery. Arlene stepped forward, and though she was my academic rival in school, we were friends, and she asked simply, "Would you like to join us as one of the North 10th Street girls?" Their heads all bobbed in unison as they faced me, looking eager and excited for me. They knew this was an honor given to a select few. They knew that being part of a group was an important part of neighborhood life. They knew this was a special invitation. Nodding yes like a bobblehead, I became a North 10th Street girl. 8 girls, my new friends, cocooned me in a group hug. We jumped up and down in unison as though we'd all won a prize. I knew I had. As we hugged and jumped, me thanking them congratulating me, I saw the curtains flutter in my grandpa's ground floor apartment window, next to the stoop. I saw the bright blue of one eye crinkle and move up and down in approval before my grandfather stepped back and let the curtain fall. There was no need to wonder how my grandfather would feel about the change that was coming. He had given his approval. Turning back to the girls, I knew that though Grandpa Anthony would sit alone on the stoop for this summer and for many summers to come, the neighborhood would always be safe when he kept watch from his folding chair on our front stoop. As the sun finally set and night brushed the buildings, we sat laughing and talking and making summer plans. We draped ourselves on stoop and railing, planning shopping trips to Fulton Street, movies at the Meserole and Greenpoint, sunning on Sheepshead Bay. And when the feast of Our Lady of Mount Carmel made its way into the conversation, our excitement swirled around us like the cotton candy we would eat at the feast. I sat in wonder at my new status and my new girlfriends. I wouldn't be alone at the feast. I would be with the North 10th Street girls. As we continued talking over each other about one thing and everything, I knew that the something more I was hoping for had arrived in the North 10th Street girls.
Escape by Susan Smith.
It was January, with her fickle promises. Fresh starts, unswerving resolutions, happiness just around the corner. On this second day of a brand new year, January had shown up icy and drizzled with gray, the sun completely forgotten. I had chosen this day, and no weather was going to stop me. This year would not be the same. If one more day passed without action, I could slip back into the dangerous malaise, just marking time again, putting mental red X's on the calendar I had labeled my demise. My anxiety was as high as my hope. I could feel someone watching me as I loaded bags and suitcases into my car trunk. Somehow he must know that I was leaving today. Even though I'd been exquisitely careful, using only cash, stashing new linens and household items under my desk at work. Co-workers were surely gossiping, but he knew no one there. None of my friends knew. Even my best friend had betrayed my confidences in the past, so I'd learned to trust no one. They would all find out soon enough. Still, I felt watched, observed, even though I knew he was very busy at work and I had plenty of time. It was a bad habit of his to spy on, record, and stalk me. He had done this even before we were a couple. I had thought the behavior might have stopped in recent years, along with his general lack of interest in me. So perhaps one of our famously nosy neighbors was at a window, wondering what I was up to. That was probably all it was. The key in my jacket pocket reassured me as I stroked it. It was stamped with the number 9, no other identifying information. I'd had it for 2 weeks, wrapped and taped in a pile of gas receipts in the glove compartment. Whenever we rode together in my car, I found myself staring at the glove compartment, wanting to open it on some pretext, just to check the key. I would resist, but the adrenaline high of freedom would course through me, and I would glance over at him, smile sweetly, and say something nice. Once he gave me a puzzled look, a sign that I had to be more careful. Too nice was suspicious at this stage of our marriage. My destination was only minutes away. Efficiency apartment number 9 was well furnished, but tiny but mine, all mine and only mine. The stairs were slippery with old moss and watery ice. Cold rain leaked through the rusty gutters, leaving wet orange streaks on my suitcase. I was thankful for my sensible flat boots as I dragged my bags up. The railing was rickety, and for the first time I noticed the peeling paint on it and on the front door. I was sure the landlord would fix all of these issues in the spring. Of course he would. The apartment was stale and dark. It had seemed so sunny and bright on the day I rented it, but today I had to grope for the light switches to see. After lighting some lavender-scented candles, I slipped a jazz CD into a mini CD player. The music was loud and sounded tinny, but it was uplifting, making me swirl, laughing around the room. He hated the unpredictable, unstructured looseness of jazz, which was precisely what I loved about it. Making up the bed with my new linens, the best sheets and comforter I could possibly afford, plus lots of cushy pillows, I reminded myself that I could still live luxuriously even in a small space. This was the compromise I was making for freedom, a lifestyle reduction in exchange for breathing room. Liberation was never free. You had to fight for every inch. I was so ready to fight, poised in my corner of this musty, dusty ring, gloves laced tight, just waiting for someone to ring the starting bell. The new drapes needed ironing, I ignored the wrinkles and hung them anyway. I had left the iron, state-of-the-art, his idea of the perfect birthday gift, on the mudroom shelf. Wrinkles weren't going to be a problem in this life. If a wrinkle dared show itself, I would ignore it until it got bored and went away. These were serious blackout drapes, expensive. Imagine the sleep I could get, finally, getting up whenever I chose. No one telling me how the early bird catches the worm, early to bed, early to rise, blah, blah, blah. If I were a bird, I'd be an owl, showing up after dark to carry off all the dirty rats scurrying around. By the time the kitchen cupboards and counters were arranged, it was noon. He would call the house on his lunch hour, a daily ritual. When I didn't answer, he would call my mobile. I wouldn't answer either phone today or tomorrow. I sat down and looked around the room, admiring all that I had accomplished during the hectic morning. I felt like I had actually pulled off the daring prison break. Escape of the century. I half expected to hear bloodhounds barking in the distance as they searched for the scent of the escapee. They won't have to go far to find me, I thought, but I won't go back alive. As I was amusing myself with thoughts of imaginary bloodhounds, my mother's voice somehow snuck into my head. I must have carelessly left a door unlatched in there, reciting the same words I had heard from her so many times. Whenever I mentioned that I had to work late, or worse yet, dared to be going out with friends, and would be out past 6 o'clock, my husband's self-designated dinner time, yes, always 6 p.m., my mother would let out her famous, "I'm so disappointed in you" sigh and say, "Well, who's going to feed that poor man?" Who indeed? Not me, not tonight. My plan was to live here for 1 year, despite the mold, moss, and peeling paint. A signed lease bound me to 12 months of a damp, cramped existence. By the time it was over, I would be free. That was how it worked, or so I had been told. If you hate it there so much, you should just leave, urged my friends. What's stopping you? You'll be fine. You don't need him or his money. My father would have said, "You're a smart girl. You'll figure it out. Just go." It was starting to get dark out. I pictured the cozy fireplace at home, logs stacked, waiting to be lit. I'd left all the Christmas lights up, and they would be coming on now, twinkling merrily. I imagined the reassuring metronome of our huge grandfather clock, hands marching steadily towards 6. The dog would be half sleeping near the front door, one eye opening with a cocked eyebrow whenever a floor creaked or the heat came on, all waiting for us to get home. By 4 o'clock, I had loaded the car back up and had everything put away at home, leaving behind the ridiculously luxurious new linens and pillows and the blackout drapes, a surprise welcome gift for the next tenant. At 5:45, I heard the car door slamming and angry footsteps coming up the walk. The door swung open so hard it dented the wall. I calmly continued stirring the sauce on the stove, looking up with a smile. His face was twisted with anger. "Where the hell have you been all day? You didn't answer any of my calls."
Wanting by Tahlia Fischer.
Wanting. What does it mean to want recognition? What does it mean to be denied recognition? Recognition, to be seen by another, to be validated, to be known and loved. Judith Butler suggests that to withhold recognition constitutes an act of violence. To be seen by another, we have no control over how we are read by others, fictionalized by others, undone or erased by their unwillingness to yield the gracious gift of recognition. No human being is free from wanting of this kind, since our very sense of existence and self are, in part, tied up with the desires, needs, fears, and hopes of others. What does it mean for someone to want a person to be someone other than who she is? In Grace's fundamentalist family, one was supposed to proffer lies as truth, an unspoken rule, but a monumental rule nonetheless. How does one want a daughter to be an eviscerated person? And for a daughter in return to offer herself in the name of that sacrifice, to be something other than what you desire for yourself, is a strange want indeed. To feign Christianity, though you were no longer a Christian, lies stood in its boundaries. Acting straight because your mother expects it from you, and because God expects it from humanity. In a fundamentalist world, there is only one truth, and everyone must suffer under its yoke. Especially after the death of Grace's mother, she felt haunted by the notion that her mother had X-ray vision from the grave, that she could see all the lies that Grace had been required to tell. Because Grace wanted to preserve the idea of her mother as a perfectly loving being, she willingly stepped into the role of the abomination. Wanting to be just as you are, and yet wanting to be nothing like you are for the sake of a loved one is an impossible terrain to navigate. Grace chose death.
Work/Life by Joan Bigwood.
I could have taken that week off. Sure, the days before Christmas see a high volume of gifts to the university, but the pre-printed postcards from a grateful institution take care of most of the donors. I could have worked from home, but that was a thing of the very distant future. I was 3 years into a job that required lavishing attention on generous benefactors. The stakes in donor cultivation and stewardship are high. One misspelling, or worse, a total omission, could undo a lot of people's very good work. I had prepared a proposal for a revamped donor recognition program that merged functions, thus minimizing mistakes. This would require more responsibility on my part and, I argued, a promotion. When I was done presenting my idea to my boss, she leaned forward in her chair and put her elbows on the desk in a gesture of conspiracy. You really want to launch something like this right now? Think about it. You're newly married. You and Rex are going to want to start a family. In the time it took me to register what this woman was selling, the exchange had taken a hard turn to time-sensitive donor reports scheduled for the next quarter. The dean's assistant called, and the conversation about the birds and the bees would not resume. I told Rex about it that night at dinner. He froze in mid-chew. She said that? Verbatim. Lawsuit. He moved his food to one cheek. That was illegal. I reluctantly scheduled a meeting with my boss for Tuesday afternoon. Obviously, I wasn't going to mention legality. This was about family planning, and that simply wasn't her business. Who even knew if I could have children? The meeting started off with the usual complaints about parking and students. At last, I found a starting point. You know how we were talking about the restructuring of donor relations last week, and you said that it was bad timing since I would want to start a family? I didn't say that. It was as if the room were bugged, the way she answered in that monotone. I straightened in my visitor chair. No, remember on Friday when I talked you through I never said that, Joan. More like being in a movie, but a movie in a nightmare where you don't know any of your lines, where everyone knows what's going on except you. Maybe it was that conversation with my boss that jinxed everything. Or maybe life on Earth really is just a vast, interdependent ecosystem, one wrong choice away from utter chaos. But that was months and months ago. For now, there were 2 more workdays until a lovely long break. I was beginning to feel positively grateful for paid leave, for advent calendars. Rex had brought one home, and I surprised even myself at how much I enjoyed opening the little windows every morning after breakfast. This year, for the Christmas family photo, our kitty would be wearing a little red hat that came on a stuffed Santa someone brought in for the office holiday party decor, and someone else had quietly removed in deference to a diversity of faith traditions. I found its little hat under the copy machine and thought it just might fit the cat. A cat who had arrived in a box delivered up the front walk by a Dour cat rescue lady. She had told me to lock him inside for 5 days to get him acclimated to his new territory, but it felt so cruel keeping him cooped up in one room. After 2 days indoors, he deserved a quick peek at the backyard. I placed him on the ground in a patch of sunshine and watched him skulk over to the back fence. But before I could scoop him up, he had scaled the 6 feet in 2 gravity-defying scampers. Watching his tail disappear triggered not so much a memory as full-body trauma, connecting back to my childhood when my older sister adopted our first cat. Margaret seemed to know everything there was to know about cats. I, on the other hand, knew nothing. I held the kitten wrong. I dropped it from too great a height to the couch. I frightened it with my sudden moves. I bothered it. Margaret could make the kitten fall asleep in the crook of her arm with a series of strokes and tugs. It was frankly miraculous. I secretly worried I would never feel expert enough to perform such miracles. Raising a life from infancy felt entirely out of reach. And now I had lost our kitten. I was dreading the Monday follow-up call from the cat rescue lady to see how he was settling in. Monday came and went, thankfully. No one called. It was after 9 at night when Rex thought he heard mewing outside the front door. But our new cat, who arrived in a box, had no idea what the front of our house even looked like. We rushed to find the little hobo cleaning himself on the porch and named him Boomerang then and there. With the holiday weekend fast approaching came a sense that important things had actually been accomplished at work. I felt the familiar satisfaction of a well-greased cog, a working part of a massive enterprise that employed 20,000 and educated 20,000 more. It had become a real point of pride that I could translate esoteric research into manageable sentences. Everyone in external relations referred to me as the writer. This was honestly payment enough, a fact which I kept to myself. And soon it would be Christmas. My boss had been right. It had happened fast. Well, the conception was quick. The pregnancy felt like it dragged on for a decade. Time away from the minutiae of the annual report was my reward. I got to skip a whole production cycle during my maternity leave. And now I was the proud mother of a 4-month-old baby girl, a bald bundle of sweet-smelling goodness sent directly from heaven. Catherine smiled on demand, and when she cooed tunefully on the changing table, her earnest brow filled in the details. She was a little hard to take at 1 and 4 in the morning, but we were adjusting. An extra 15-minute stretch of sleep would buoy me along a goodly distance. Ironically, time with Catherine was an antidote to the crushing exhaustion we both felt. She was the release valve Rex needed after a 12-hour day running a busy tech support department. He would sit and stare at his baby girl laid out on his lap on her back, staring up at his dopey smile. All too quickly, I had had to return to my desk, where I moved descriptive sentences around dense paragraphs in deep concentration, my swollen breasts aching to be emptied. Nowadays, family life felt like a series of border skirmishes. Rex and I competed as to who had had the tougher day, ahead, just spent, the one last week that kicked off a chain of mishaps, or whose sleep was suffering more. Things for the baby were constantly mislaid, forgotten, or lost, and the shared frustration was wearing us down. We were young, raw, and we so wanted to get it right, including this new marriage that felt empty of affection and at the same time overcrowded with unspoken resentment. We had a quick conversation from our desks before turning to our respective busyness. We covered the grocery list and last-minute holiday gift ideas. We traded love yous at the end of the call. As I hung up, I noticed the message light come on. The galley copy of the annual report needed proofreading, which required a long block of uninterrupted time, so I picked up the message first and immediately called Rex back. The baby stopped breathing. I assumed she had started up again, but all the same, the home daycare lady insisted we were needed at ER. What if there'd been brain damage? I grabbed my handbag where it slumped on the floor and ran out past a lone admin staring at her computer screen. The baby stopped breathing, I whispered. She understood better than I did where this was headed. Word spread around the office before I'd covered the 1 mile to the university hospital. But first, I had to reach my car 2 parking lots away in my work pumps, panting, pounding, breathing for 2. I spotted the home daycare lady near the registration desk, this near stranger, a neighbor who takes in kids and babies. I needed her for 5 days while our new shared nanny recovered from cataract surgery. The distraught daycare lady stood next to a policeman and a dark-skinned man I'd never seen before. Who was that man, and why was he here with that policeman? The uniformed officer took me immediately through a special doorway where we could be alone. He informed me that my daughter was in full arrest. Had I not taken that CPR class at work, I would not have understood the term, but I did understand. There is no coming back from full arrest. Turns out the strange man at reception rented a room at the daycare. He was a Brazilian lifeguard who'd immediately performed life-saving measures. I understood with great clarity that unlike Boomerang, even with a hero on the premises, Catherine was not coming back. A kind physician's assistant informed me that a team was working on oxygenating Catherine. I wouldn't find out for another year that SIDS babies can turn the color of blue ink. Oxygenation works like stain remover. I was handed a pale little Catherine, who really did look asleep, until one staring eye opened. By now her daddy was there to close the eye again before I even noticed. I wailed like an animal for well over an hour, cradling my daughter's corpse. They finally had to ask for her back. It took me another 20 minutes to muster the strength to say goodbye to Catherine for the last time. We stepped back outside. Bouquets of clouds consoled us as I stumbled into our fragile future, empty-armed and broken. If I'd only taken that week off, extending my maternity 1 lousy week. If only I had discerned the radical notion that my time as a new mother would be better spent with my baby in the week leading up to Christmas. Maybe, just maybe, there would have been 3 stockings on the fireplace that year, instead of none.
Mother is Dead, Now What? By Laura Denton.
Staying in a yurt in the North Carolina mountains, I got the message that my mother had died. I was frantic to get back to Philadelphia. I called the airlines only to hear there were no seats on flights to Philadelphia. I demanded, find me something. I don't care if I have to fly to Dallas to get to Philly. Just get me there. I flew to Atlanta and on to Philly. My brother Tom and Dad were walking toward me in the hallway. We paused, hugged, and continued to baggage claim. I'd always been appreciative of the full-body hugs these 2 gave. I'd had a couple of drinks on the flights and was not pleased to be yanked back to Philadelphia. Filthy Delphia, I muttered, chanting as if a protective mantra and thinking, you're not fooling me. I know the character of this city. I'd vowed to leave Philadelphia, convinced my time there was done. I had finished my master's degree and worked for the following year. The place depressed me. None of my friendships seemed worth staying for. I wanted new and different, but didn't know what or where. I'd been looking for a job at an alternative school. The green of North Carolina had attracted me, so I'd traveled to a small community for an interview and visit. A year earlier, in 1973, Alice, my mother, was diagnosed with ovarian cancer and began treatments. After the initial surgery, she spent the ensuing time in and out of the hospital, trying a variety of treatments, some experimental. Our family had remained optimistic throughout. Even so, there had been plenty of signs that the end was near. Yet I left for a month focused on my future. Boomeranging back was frustrating, and her death hit me hard. It was somehow both expected and not expected. She was only 49 years old. Here we were, the surviving family, here to honor Alice, here to support each other in our grief, here to determine next steps. There was a long to-do list, people to notify, obituary to write, funeral to plan. We wanted a memorial service for our mother, wife, not a traditional funeral. Something unique, like she was. We wanted to celebrate her achievements. Alice had always been involved in community good works. When I was in 8th grade, she started graduate school and became a reference librarian. She'd been raised in a professional family. She expected to contribute. She was a pioneer in these times when women were emerging from the role of housewife to serve in a larger sphere. Dad had begun his work at UPenn in January 1973, moving to the Philadelphia area from Northern Virginia. Mom moved during the summer after she secured her job at Temple University Library. They had few connections in the community and no church affiliation. There'd been no time. Alice had arrived only a month or two earlier. We, the survivors, chose a church, a pastor, at random. We met with a minister from an historic Presbyterian church to acquaint him with our mother and plan the service. Her family had come from a long line of Presbyterians, including some influential ministers in the mid-1800s. The three of us were united in the idea that she was not a typical woman of the time. I strongly objected to the term obituary and insisted it be called a biography. I would write it with emphasis on her achievements and profession. We had a list of her favorite Bible verses. We had definite vetoes to some of the funeral standards the minister suggested. The minister seemed confused. We were not following his guidance. We were opinionated. Here's the deal. We are not ordinary people. We do not want an ordinary funeral. We want this funeral to honor who she was, her exceptionalities. She was an exemplary person, and this will not be a cookie-cutter funeral. We reached an agreement eventually. The single remaining issue was the music. We wanted to provide her favorite music, the highly structured Bach organ music. Tom, the music major, asked for information about the sound system. He explained that he'd provide our music in the format that their system could handle. This period, the mid-1970s, was a point of transition in music recording. Monaural music had all instruments on one track, or stereo recordings with left-right sides differentiated. Tom, once told it was stereo, proceeded to put together the selections we wanted. Aunt Pauline, together with Aunt Mary and Uncle John, drove up from Virginia. Longtime friends from the East Coast were there. Colleagues from her current and previous jobs were in attendance. As my first funeral, I had no expectations. I discovered that we, as family, were put into a room at the side, out of view of the rest of the congregants. The first blip was when the minister said, obituary, the word I specifically told him not to use. He recovered himself quickly to explain that the family requested the reading of this biography. We were partway into the ceremony when we began to realize that the music was unrecognizable, in fact, very strange. What is this? Tom whispered. We stared at each other and gestured our confusion. What's wrong with the music? It didn't take Tom long to figure out the problem. This was not a stereo sound system. Tapes had 4 tracks, Stereo used tracks 1 and 3, with 2 and 4 played on the reverse course. But when played on a monaural machine, tracks 1 and 2 played. Track 1 was playing as it should, but track 2 was backwards. It was dissonant, bizarre, spooky. All our plans for having control of the funeral were lost. All our ideas of honoring the exemplary individual of our mother had faded away. It was unique, all right, just not the way we'd wanted. Let's just get through this. We have to pretend it's as planned. What a joke, we've said in later years, but I thought, what? Would it have been so hard to do something slightly different? Would it have been so hard to actually check on the sound system? A popular saying of the time was, what a farce. Indeed, sometimes there's nothing to do but laugh. Yet, perhaps it was a metaphor for my life. I was going forward and backward at the same time. We had a few more days of hand-holding, of sending out the letter announcing Alice's death with an enclosed copy of the biography I'd written. We sat around in the evenings encircling the familiar glass-topped coffee table, drinking scotch, failing to notice our increasing inebriation. We'd rehash old memories. We'd address some current issues. We stayed up late, bonding as survivors. I would search the ashtray for the longer butts of commercial cigarettes, and in our desperation, roll new cigarettes. I don't remember who else was smoking, but I was the one with the rolling expertise. One evening, Dad reprimanded me for my Impeach Nixon bumper sticker. He explained, in fatherly advice mode, that such public displays of political views could lead to trouble. Someone might decide to deface my car or cut me off in traffic. This was a pivotal moment for Tom, according to his telling. Tom believed himself aligned with Dad. Yes, you should be careful. People might react and damage your car, he said. 2 against 1. I'd never win this argument. Then Tom shifted. I suddenly realized he was supporting me. He began to say things like, "It's not so dangerous," and "She has the right to express her opinions publicly and privately." Tom had declared himself. He said later that he asked himself, "Why am I parroting Dad's ideas? I agree with Laura." It was only a few days later that Tom beckoned me to the edge of our parents' bed by the extension phone I had used to tell him our parents were withholding information from him. They decided not to tell him Alice was on her final experimental therapy, that she was weak, exhausted, and not sure she was up to the fight. I'd called, urging him to force the issue by calling them and asking for an update. He stood a foot away from me and gestured with his index finger between our chests, heart to heart. "We're it," was how he began that afternoon. "It's you and me. We have to pledge to be there for each other. We are all the family we've got." He was 21. I was close to 24. I stared at him, recognizing the seriousness of what he was saying. "We can't count on Dad. It's you and me," he continued, emphasizing the importance of family and pointing out who was reliable. It was certainly true that Jesse, our dad, had no real connection to family. He had cut himself off from his family of origin, even those who had done him no harm. Tom was saying, in essence, that we had to recognize this deficit in Jesse, not expect the impossible, and create our own version of family. This concept lay in the background of my thinking for many years, but it was there, a foundation of support, a strong subterranean current deep in my soul. I've called on him. He's called on me. We are solid. This is the unconditional love that we did not get from our parents.
The Death Rattle by McCarthy Strauss.
On Saturday morning, I tried to focus on writing an essay about the loneliness of being a caregiver. Collapsed in my recliner, I balanced my laptop on my thighs and sipped my coffee, careful not to spill it onto my computer. It was just after 8 o'clock when the house phone rang. It could only be Jack, Our Lady of Hope, or a nuisance call. Only a handful of people had my home number. I glanced at caller ID and saw it was Our Lady of Hope. My heart hammered in my chest. "Hello," I said, lifting the receiver with a shaking hand. "Hello, Mrs. Golden?" I heard a lot of activity behind the professional-sounding female voice. "Yes, this is Ann Golden," I said. "Hello, Ann. This is Becky Brewer at OLOH. I don't think we've spoken. I'm on the weekend shift." My anxiety silently begged Becky to tell me why she was calling, not what shift she worked on. "Hello, Becky." Mercifully, she continued, "I'm calling because your husband is not doing well. We think you should come to the nursing home." Because of COVID, I had seen Larry fewer than 10 times in the last 19 months. One of the few times visitors were allowed to come to nursing homes was when a patient was dying. "I'll be right there," I said, and hung up the phone. Convinced the moment was finally upon him, I pulled on my jeans and tugged a black t-shirt over my head. In my mind, I'd already been a widow for years. Soon I might be playing the role for real. I sped down the Northway, my GPS scoping out the cops who dotted the median, just waiting to ruin a speeder's day. "There's a speed trap ahead," my GPS warned me 3 times before I left the highway. Once on Western Avenue, I still had 3 miles to drive, and this road had traffic lights. I must have hit every one, adding 10 minutes to my trip. Finally, the GPS told me to make a left on Eugen Lane in a quarter mile. The oncoming traffic crawled by for 5 minutes before I could finally make my turn. I drove a short distance away from Western Avenue, where the sounds grew quiet and pleasant. Instead of 18-wheelers, I heard birds singing. The campus consisted of 3 buildings that looked more residential than commercial, a haven in the morning sunlight. Residents had planted flowers, many of which were in bloom. I pulled into a parking space close to the doorway of Larry's building, Hope House. I sat frozen behind the steering wheel, my body feeling like a statue. I began to simultaneously cry and hyperventilate. If I stayed in the car, I wouldn't have to face whatever was waiting for me behind the doors of Hope House. I searched my purse for a tissue, but came up empty. My hands would have to suffice for wiping my face. Luckily, I never wore makeup anymore, so there would be none to smear. After a few minutes of deep breathing, I was ready to go inside. Was I too late? Would they tell me he was dead? I opened the car door and headed for Hope House, walking slowly and feeling old. I knocked on the plate glass. A small hanging bell jingled as I opened the door. A receptionist named Jane jumped up and came around a large wooden desk as I entered the building. She gave me a short smile, then quickly stepped back. "We have to get you suited up to visit your husband," she said. "Visit," she'd said, "visit." That meant he was still alive. Jane stepped behind her desk and started to gather personal protective equipment. I'd never seen someone dress in PPE, and now with Jane's help, I was going to do it. She indicated a bottle of hand sanitizer, with which I washed my hands for 20 seconds at her instruction. Next, with a gloved hand, she handed me a paper gown and had me put it on with the opening in the back. I tied a paper strip around my waist, another behind my neck. The next step was to secure a surgical mask over my nose and mouth. Then I put on protective eye gear. The last step was to insert my hands into gloves and tug them up to reach the wrists of the gown. Feeling like an alien, I followed a nurse down the hall, thinking, this is love in the time of COVID. We entered the first room in the hall. The first thing I noticed was the sound. It was a rattling sound that crackled loudly, paused, and then resumed. As I followed the nurse toward the bed near the window, the noise grew louder. It was clear that the sound was coming from Larry, who lay in the bed. "What is that sound?" I asked the nurse. We paused at the foot of the bed. He was unconscious. "I hope you won't find the sound too unsettling," she said. "It's a sound some people emit in their final hours. It's called the death rattle." I gave the sound coming from Larry's chest my full attention. His breathing was labored, a wet, crackling noise. Between breaths, the sound stopped. I remembered hearing the term death rattle before. Years ago, at a colleague's college graduation, the dignitaries sat lined up on the stage. One man began to die during the ceremony. Throughout the graduation, he emitted a death rattle that could be heard between speeches and the conferring of degrees. For whatever reason, the choice was to leave him on the stage until all the others had filed away. "I've heard of the death rattle," I said. "I do find it disturbing. When will it stop?" "Once the death rattle starts, it generally continues until the patient passes away," she said. "It happens because the patient is unable to clear their throat. Then this sound, this death rattle, is a harbinger of death. It means Larry is dying. I'm guessing the sound will last just a few more minutes." She shook her head. "Actually, a death rattle can go on for up to 48 hours. Together we moved to the side of the bed. "You can stay with him as long as you like." She indicated a chair. "Click the buzzer if you need anything, and of course, if the rattle grows excessive or stops." When she left, she closed the door behind her. I settled into an uncomfortable straight-back chair and took out my Kindle. I wondered why I had brought it with me. I hadn't read a book since the pandemic began. While most of my friends were catching up on their reading because there was little else to do, I couldn't find anything to read that would hold my interest. I watched television more than usual, especially anything about the pandemic. Every morning at 11:30, then New York Governor Andrew Cuomo gave a report on the current conditions in various areas of the state. He cited statistics on hospitalizations, deaths, and the positivity rate. He always ended by putting as positive a spin as possible on the day's conditions. He spoke calmly and reassuringly. Those reports gave me more comfort than anything else during the pandemic. It was nearing 11:30 and there was a television in Larry's room. I flipped it on to hear the governor speak. At the time, people with intense COVID were being placed in nursing homes to isolate them from the healthy population. It was strange to watch the report from inside one of those places where people were dying daily from the disease. I no longer felt safe as I did when I watched the governor's report at home. I switched off the television with my gloved hand. With the television off, Larry's death rattle was the only sound in the room. When the rattle paused, I was anxious for it to start up again, so I'd know he was still alive. Still, it was an awful sound, an omen of his imminent death. He lay in the hospital bed, hovering somewhere between this world and the next. The rattle was so loud at times it seemed to bounce off the walls. I wanted it to stop. Of course, that would mean he was gone. I walked to the edge of the bed and took his hand in both of mine. I told him I had done my best, but I knew my best could have been better. I reminded him that I was not cut out for nursing. "I'm sorry our marriage hasn't been like it was at the beginning for so many years," I said, tears dripping down my face. "I know you knew I wasn't happy. But I didn't leave you, Larry. Once you got sick, there was no way I would ever have left you. I took the best care of you I could." And after, there was a quick knock at the door, and the door opened. I glanced at the clock on the wall. 4 o'clock, shift change. A male nurse with slicked back hair and wide shoulders came into the room and introduced himself. "Mrs. Golden, I am Alfredo. I will be your husband's nurse for the next shift. I'm so sorry I interrupted your conversation." "Not at all, Alfredo," I said. "I know he can't hear me and isn't going to respond. I was just telling him some things that he probably knew, things I wouldn't say to him if he was awake." "I understand," he said. The strain of the seams of his uniform told me that when he wasn't working, he was at the gym. I have worked in this unit for 2 years. I have seen so much interaction between people who are passing on and their loved ones. It is never the same as a conversation between two conscious people. I laid Larry's hand on the mattress and stepped back from the bed. No, I don't suppose it is. In this situation, you can be completely candid. Your husband is in good hands, Alfredo said. Please don't feel you have to stay. Sometimes patients hold on until their loved ones go home. It's as if they don't want to break their hearts by dying in front of them. Do you really think you can tell I'm here? I asked. We don't know, the nurse said. I gathered my purse and told Alfredo I was exhausted and starving. Going home seemed like a good idea. I will give you a few minutes alone with him before you go, he said. Find me at the nurse's station when you're finished here, and I will come in and tend to him. Thank you, I said, as he stepped out and closed the door. I returned to the bed and lay my purse on the mattress. Again, I took Larry's hand in mine, but this time I didn't say anything. I simply stood there for a while, remembering the good times, regretting the bad, wishing things could have been different. But disease had been the third party in our marriage for 23 years. It had changed everything. I felt my eyes start to tear. I wasn't going to cry again. Not now. Goodbye, sweetheart, I whispered. I lay his hand on the mattress, picked up my purse, and walked to the nurse's station.
My North Star by Susan Graham.
What if I had lost Sarah? Twice I almost miscarried. I was high risk from the beginning, Rh negative and 37 years old. I was also type 1 VWD, known as von Willebrand's, an inherited blood disorder. At 6 weeks, the bleeding started. I was terrified, begging God to please keep the pregnancy going. Bed rest. Then several weeks later, heavy spotting. Same scenario. Somehow I made it into the second trimester. I was now up and walking. During my entire pregnancy, I never wanted to know what the sex was. I had ultrasound at various points to see how the baby was, and I told the attending technicians, please don't tell me. The nurses were shocked, as were my friends. Everyone was so nosy. Girlfriends would tell me I would be so much easier to decorate a nursery, easier to buy clothes. It didn't matter to me. Everyone forgot that I had major surgery 9 years earlier to save my uterus from a tumor so that one day I could have a child. That's when my doctor discovered my blood disorder. Oh, how bruised I was around the sutures, and the healing took forever. I still bear the scar. So I didn't mind the plethora of white, yellow, and green baby clothes. For the bedding, I chose a bright green, light blue, and yellow barnyard scene, and right smack in the middle of the comforter was a red barn. The black and white Holstein cows, pink pigs, and yellow ducks danced around the barn with their happy faces. My mother was so disappointed in the bedding. She said it was too busy and entirely too bright of a pattern and would confuse the baby's eyes. When my mother wasn't looking, I gave her an eye roll, one of many I would make over the years to people sticking their noses into my child rearing. Although I did not know the sex of my baby, I knew if I had a daughter, I would name her Sarah Marie. I had actually picked the baby's name back in high school. It was a James Taylor song, Sarah Maria, from the Gorilla album, 1976. I decided then at 16 on Sarah Marie. I changed the middle name from Maria to Marie in honor of my family's French bloodline. My Labor Day came, and 8.5-pound Sarah Marie was born. I hated the nighttime nurse in the nursery. She came in one night and woke me up to feed Sarah. She announced that my baby in all of her years had the loudest cry and woke all the other babies up in the nursery. The nurse was an old, cranky, burnt-out bitch with a huge ass. She brought my daughter in for me to quiet her down and feed her so she could put her back to bed. I found out her foot had been pricked with a needle, some protein test done on newborns. That was 26 years ago. I am remembering these moments in time now because recently I took a mother-daughter vacation with Sarah. I let her pick. Destin, Florida, Mom, that's where I want to go. It's on the Gulf. We learned why it was called the Emerald Coast. Fine white soft sand met clear tropical water on the shore. However, when you looked out over the crashing waves and beyond to the horizon, the surface of the water was a deep emerald green hue. White thunderhead clouds appeared every day. Sometimes the clouds were heavy with tropical rain. We could hear the distant thunder in the evenings. In the day, we walked along the beach and later waded out further to our waists. We were amazed and delighted that our new, brightly painted vacation pedicures could be seen so clearly through the water. In the evenings, we sat on the balconies, drinking wine and laughing. We colored in a mermaid coloring book. Late one afternoon, as the sun was low, my daughter wanted to take a walk. I just wanted to lie under the umbrella. Okay, Mom, she said. I'll be back in a bit. I watched her walk down to the shore and head off. She was in a black one-piece with a floppy straw hat and a loose white linen shirt. My little girl was all grown up. She had a woman's body with rounded hips, full bust, a far cry from her elementary days when she was so skinny I was afraid people would think I wasn't feeding her. I was amazed and so grateful for her. From the day this angry, wailing, red-faced baby girl was placed in my arms, she became my North Star. The choices I made in my life were made with her as my marker. Sarah was a chubby, happy baby. I was told I held her too much. I made an eye roll. I spoke to her like an adult. I used grown-up words. She doesn't understand what you are saying. You are wasting your time, was the remark. A massive eye roll when I heard that one. We used baby talk when playing. As a toddler, I allowed her to make as many messes as possible to explore her creative side. My mother-in-law visiting us one year claimed I was lazy and I needed to clean up every mess she made. What did she say? In an email addressed to all the family, I was a terrible housekeeper. Those eye rolls held many tears in them. The shame I felt after that email was sent lasted years. It marked the end of any trust in my mother-in-law, and then sadly broke open the many flaws in my marriage. As a child, Sarah loved the Disney princesses. She danced around with the tiara on her head, waving a magic plastic wand. Sarah thought she was a mermaid or wanted to be one. She was Ariel every Halloween. After the Disney princesses, the littlest pet shops came along. She spent many hours playing with them. She was the sweetest child, so happy and exuberant, full of life. We made a major move from Los Angeles to Omaha when Sarah entered junior high. Her father went off to Afghanistan as a government contractor. Her personality changed. I called those years the longest period ever, complete with nonstop PMS and massive eye rolls from her. Then I found out that some kids found out that she still played with the littlest pet shop and made fun of her. She was mortified. Then the name calling. Sarah was an A student, but her nickname was Jew. That's what some of the boys called her. You were only smart because you are a Jew from Tinseltown. That's what she endured. We weren't Jewish. We weren't anything. I left my Catholic roots in favor of a more earthly belief. I did not get my daughter baptized. Her journey to the divine was hers and hers alone. The eye rolls I received after people heard my views was legion. There is a church on every corner in Omaha, and you are known by the church you attend. A limiting belief in my view. High school came and the sexual assault she received in a hallway from someone she knew. And those sons and daughters who attended those churches on every corner cheered the boy on. Grab her tits, grab her tits. And my daughter was slammed into the lockers as she fought the bastard off. My daughter calmly walked to the principal's office and had the police called and formally pressed charges. The boy was expelled, all in a day. College days came and you selected a private Jesuit college, Rockhurst in Kansas City. just far enough away from home to feel independent. I didn't care for the drinking you did, short skirts, no panties, pulling all-nighters, and one night so drunk you broke your foot. You managed to graduate with honors. I miss the days when I visited you and I sat in the shade under an ancient tree next to a statue of Mary, waiting for you to come out of class so we could start our mommy and me weekends. Sarah was so full of life, happy in college. I stare out over the emerald waters and think back to what if I had lost you, I would not have you here beside me walking the beach together or picking out your wedding gown. This is the reason for our trip, our last trip with you as a single woman, and me celebrating 1 full year of me being on my own. My marriage ended, but I would not have you if it weren't for the choices I made early in my life. I look up at the coastline and see a familiar figure, a young woman whose confident stride I know all too well. She walks with her head held high, black one-piece, floppy straw hat, a loose white linen shirt blowing in the wind. We see each other and wave. My beautiful Sarah Marie, my North Star. You made my life all the better, more richer. I am filled with more gratitude that I almost lost you.
The Mysteries of Trader Joe's by Anne Voorhees Baker. I'm often invisible. I'm 65. When I have to shop at the Big Ralph's grocery store on Pacific Coast Highway, a store the size of a football field, I am clear as glass. I walk the 15 massive aisles past the shelves, stacked high above my head, the multitude of printed advertisements, specials, exhortations to buy the big factory-made brands. I stand in line. I am rung up by the cashier, and I leave, a ghost. I like to shop at Trader Joe's down in Riviera Village, my little beach town in Southern California. It's just a block from the sand. There's an ocean breeze, and often you can hear the pounding of the waves as you walk past a row of tall, slender palm trees through the small brick paved parking lot toward the door. The store is tiny, just 4 short aisles. I think it might be the smallest Trader Joe's in the country. It is full of cheerful staff, maybe legit, maybe an act practiced by the employees, but it's so pleasant. The light is warm, the walls are wood paneled, reusable shopping bags hang by the front door. There's a stand by the hand baskets, stacked with the latest Trader Joe's newsletter, The Fearless Flyer, a thin booklet of cheap newsprint featuring the same old-timey woodcut art they've used since the 70s. Signs in front of the flowers and specials are handwritten in multicolored chalk on little gray slate boards. There are organic options for just about everything, cheaper than at the regular grocery store. And they still sell $2 chuck. I mean, it's $3.49 now at my store, but I mean, a bottle of wine for less than $4 still? Shut your mouth. I confess I would be in love with Trader Joe's just for that. $4, $2 chuck is a daily act of great kindness to the American people. I like the way they run the place, an egalitarian system. The young woman stocking bags of organic kale and produce might be mopping the floor the next day or doing checkout at the register. The workers are a hodgepodge of young and old, white and black. They wear t-shirts and jeans with a tool clip to their belts, except for the managers, who wear aloha shirts. And they're always friendly, even to invisible people like me. One day there was a new cashier, a slender, dark-skinned young man who turned his surprisingly bright blue eyes to me and said in a lovely, lilting accent, "How is your day going today?" He was looking right at me and smiling. Another TJer came over to pack, a young white guy with his dark blonde hair and a ponytail and a surfer's t-shirt with 2 palm trees over the left breast. As he lifted my bag of purple sweet potatoes, he said, "I haven't tried these yet. Are they good?" "I love them," I said. "They're super starchy and sticky, and they turn dark purple when they're cooked." "Cool," he said. I'm going to get a bag. As always, the bagging was swift and efficient and bump and bruise free. As the packer trotted off to get my case of $4 $2 chuck, the beautiful cashier put my bag of food in the cart. The packer came back and placed the case of wine in the seat of the cart. Good thinking, easy to lift out when I put it in my trunk, and our little group time came to a close. Then, for no reason whatsoever, the young cashier reached out with both hands and very gently encased my right hand between his. He leaned ever so slightly forward. "Have a wonderful evening," he said. For a moment, I wondered, is he going to kiss my hand? Even the bagger looked perplexed. I looked into the cashier's bright blue eyes. I believed that he meant it. I said, "Thank you." On another visit to Trader's, I bypassed the shopping carts and went directly to a cashier. "I just need a case of Trader's Cabernet Sauvignon," I said. "Hey, don't judge me." The bagger at the register left and pulled a box off one of the stacks against the wall. When he came back, he asked, "Do you need help to your car?" I said, "Oh, no, I'm fine. My car is just outside the door. I can carry it." "Hey, no," he said, a young spry guy with dark wavy hair and a 5 o'clock shadow and a friendly smile. "I'll take it for you." He walked ahead, and I followed, mercifully free of the weight of the unwieldy box. Grateful. As I stepped through the doorway to the outside, the underground lights in the center of the lot suddenly clicked on and flooded the prehistoric trunks of the swaying palm trees with a soft glow. A high-up breeze swept the palm fronds, and I heard the whoosh of the leaves from 100 feet above me. The sky was a dark slate blue with high dust-gray clouds. All along the street to the left of us, the buildings glowed as if from inside themselves, with a peachy golden sheen from the sun setting over the ocean behind us. And then I saw Jesus. He drove by in his van. Jesus was a fixture in Riviera Village, a pale, slight, clean-shaven man of indeterminate age, whose traveling home was decorated headlights to taillights, top to bottom, with crosses and words in various sizes cut from poster board in fluorescent shades of magenta and blue and green. Jesus, Savior, pray, Jesus, and links of fluttering gold tinsel. Jesus often parked his van in the big general lot across the street from Trader Joe's. And most days he stood on a little curb lawn under a eucalyptus tree, holding his Bible. He always wore a too large suit jacket that came down almost to his knees, and a Civil War era forage cap with a flat, squashed down top and a short front bill. Usually a card saying Jesus also was mounted on the bill. He wore long tan pants, clean, although they were torn at the bottom, not hemmed, which you noticed only if you walked close by. Gold epaulettes made out of the same tinsel as on his van decorated the shoulders of his jacket. So Jesus in his fluttering van drove by, and in that one breath of a moment, the Jesuses and Saviors and crosses and tinsel flashed as the light caught them, and suddenly the interior of the van burst into light. I gaped at the entire mysterious scene, stricken, suddenly emotionally afloat, my face turned upward, my mouth partially opened, and I absently pressed the button to pop open the trunk. The young man slid the case of wine in, straightened, and then he too looked up. He slowly turned all the way around in a full circle as he swept his eyes over Jesus in his flame of light, the indigo sky, the rustling palms, the glowing buildings. When he came back and faced me again, he said, "Want to come back at 11 and dance?" I am not making this up. "Yes," I said, "but don't you close at 8? "No, 9, he said, and smiled. I was disappointed. 9 o'clock. Apparently we were done playing our little game. "Yeah, but we're stocking and cleaning till 11, he said. I stood taller. "Well then, I'll be here." And in that delightful, mystical moment, it seemed as possible that this could happen as it was impossible that it was being said. I got in my car smiling. I drove home. My husband and I went out to the patio and sat under the twilight sky in the old pull-apart beach chairs he'd made so long ago that the wood had become striated with age and turned gray. He opened one of the $4 $2 chucks. I described the improbable scene. And, I said, the bagger didn't call me ma'am. We clinked our wine glasses, and the last of the light caught the wine and made the bowls of glass glow like garnets. Maybe they pump super oxygenated air into that store. Maybe they add a hint of cannabis. Maybe all the folks who work there start each day, the aloha shirt managers and the jeans and tool belt workers, with a yoga meditation, a mantra, an affirmation, a prayer. Whatever it is, however it is, I applaud it. In fact, I give it a standing ovation.